This week on Government Matters.
And we hope that he will have more opportunity over the next year to articulate a vision beyond just what the programs are that have been put into place.
Secretary Jeh Johnson just delivered his final State of Homeland Security address. We address Johnson's legacy and the challenges ahead.
So part of it is money. The other part is just to reduce inefficient buying.
The General Services Administration is consolidating Salesforce-related contracts. Will that effort give them a leg up on the competition? We talk CRM.
We're somewhere around 75 or 80% of our IT funds go to maintaining legacy systems. That's not a recipe for progress.
The tectonic plates of federal contracting are shifting. We track the mood of the marketplace. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. Apple has until Tuesday to protest the decision of a California court. The high-profile legal argument pits Apple against the FBI and digital privacy rights against national security interests. It's a fight that's been brewing for some time. Elizabeth Herb has the latest.
The White House wants Apple to do what a California judge ordered, hack into the iPhone used by that terror suspect in the San Bernardino massacre and help investigators get some answers.
They are not asking Apple to redesign its product or to create a new backdoor to one of their products. They're simply asking for something that would have an impact on this one device.
Ultimately, I think being a good corporate citizen is important.
While some of the Republican hopefuls are siding with the Obama administration, these Apple customers disagree.
What Apple's doing is standing up for all of our security.
It's easy to imagine malicious hackers or identity thieves or really any number of people trying to gain access to it.
And Apple is standing firm, vowing to appeal. CEO Tim Cook saying the implications of the government's demands are chilling, adding that the software is, quote, something we simply do not have and something we consider too dangerous to create, arguing if they find a way to break into that phone, they'll be able to then break into any phone. But law enforcement officials say Apple iPhone encryption for investigations is crippling and unlocking devices is critical.
So much of the attention has been focused appropriately and of necessity on the terrorism aspects of this, the impact on the day-to-day lives of Americans, on their safety, and our ability to solve and prevent crime is of even more significance.
Legal experts say this really is a landmark case, and now Microsoft and Google are also weighing in, saying they're with Apple on this one and believe there should be no government backdoors into your devices. Elizabeth Herr, ABC News, New York.
Time magazine says Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson probably has the hardest job in America. Last week, he tried to summarize that job during an hour-long speech at the Wilson Center in Washington. Diane Cho has more.
Delivering his final State of Homeland Security address at the Wilson Center, Secretary Jeh Johnson began by highlighting his agency's accomplishments.
It's the nature of our business in Homeland Security that no news is good news. But no news is very often the product of the hard work and extraordinary, courageous effort our people put in every day to keep the American public safe.
Johnson says last fiscal year, TSA officers screened 695 million passengers and seized 2,500 firearms from carry-on bags. This after a report by ABC News last year, which showed undercover agents were able to sneak in fake weapons through TSA checkpoints nearly 96% of the time.
As many of you know, in May of last year, a certain classified DHS Inspector General's test of TSA screening at 8 airports reflected a dismal fail rate and was leaked to the press.
Johnson also took on topics like the need to improve employee morale. DHS consistently finished at or near the bottom of federal employee viewpoint surveys.
It takes time to turn a 22-component workforce of 240,000 people in a different direction. Though the overall results last year were still disappointing, we see signs of improvement.
As for its counterterrorism efforts,
given the prospect of the terrorist-inspired attack in the homeland, we have intensified our work with state and local law enforcement. Almost every day, DHS and the FBI share intelligence and information with joint terrorism task forces, fusion centers, local police chiefs, and sheriffs.
Johnson acknowledged weaknesses in the National Terrorism Advisory System. It's a system DHS never used.
It consisted of just two types of alerts, elevated and eminent, and depended on the presence of a known, specific, and credible threat. This does not work in the current environment. So in December, we added a new form of advisory, the NTAS Bulletin, to the existing alerts.
It's Johnson's last year at the department. 2017 will mark a new administration.
I intend to make every day count. The former president of my alma mater, Morehouse College, used to tell his students, "We only have just a minute, but eternity is in it, and it's up to us to use it." With Deputy Secretary Ali Mayorkas as my partner, we will push an aggressive agenda to the end.
For Government Matters, I'm Diane Cho.
Let's pick things up there with Security Matters. Joining me, Marc Pearl, President and CEO of the Homeland Security and Defense Business Council. Marc, let's start with a little history lesson. Is the State of Homeland Security addressing something new? Why are these speeches important?
Well, it's always important to share a message. It's always important to educate the public, the employees within the government, as to what the state of Homeland Security is, and to help define it as well.
That's a good point. And Diane's report pointed out some of the challenges DHS faces, like TSA screening, employee morale, and holes in the Einstein system. You watched Johnson's speech. What did he leave out?
Well, first of all, it's very hard to cover, even in an hour presentation, the entire state of an important agency like the Department of Homeland Security. I think that if there was one thing that I'm hopeful that the Secretary will address in his last year, similar to the way that Secretary Chertoff did in his last year with the Bush administration, is to articulate a vision of what Homeland Security and what the Homeland Security enterprise is, which is beyond just the four walls of DHS. What the vision of cybersecurity, for example, may look like beyond just what the programs are. And those are some of the things that we're looking forward to the Secretary and his team addressing over the next year before they hand over the keys to the new administration.
More on that, Marc. We've been following an ongoing budgetary concern here on Government Matters about the difference between cybersecurity and IT spending. There's plenty of overlap here. Did Johnson address that concern?
To a certain extent, but not really. I think that the nature of what the digital services platform is, what Einstein is going to be, what he called the cybersecurity advisor team, expert advisor team, are all programs that are important, but a vision with regard to cybersecurity and how we get both industry as well as even other agencies involved. It's not just under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. It involves agencies like NSA, FBI, and many other agencies that have to embrace the concept of cybersecurity, as well as what they're going to implement in every single federal agency across the entire horizon.
Now, you're exactly right about that. And Homeland Security's relationship with the business community is at a critical juncture. Just this week, Apple announced it will fight a court order to assist the FBI in hacking an iPhone. How does this relate to DHS?
Well, it relates to all of the federal government and its relationship with industry. We need to develop, and to a certain extent, the Secretary was talking about the concept that what he's doing is more than just software, it's about people. And I would just take that a step further, that we need to build trusted relationships with everyone. That goes to the morale within the federal government space, but it also goes to the industry. If there are trusted relationships, then you don't have to go to a court to, in essence, get and extract what's in the lockbox of any individual company. We need to have industry and government working better together in a better quality relationship that will in fact allow everyone to leverage their creativity, their innovation, and their expertise so that government can take full advantage of what industry has to offer.
Marc, before you go, let's talk legacy. How do you grade Secretary Johnson's tenure, and what does the next secretary need to carry out his vision for DHS?
That's a good question. I think that legacy, as I think President Bush, George W. Bush said, is going to be determined well after he was out of office. There is no question that part of what Secretary Johnson and his team calls pouring cement into their programs and their process is important. I call, do they have what they've tried to achieve? Has it been baked in? The legacy of what Secretary Johnson articulated during his State of the Homeland Security is whether or not on January 21st, 2017, the processes that he's put into place, his unity of effort, both as a capital U and a capital E, as well as a small u and small e, what he's articulated in terms of his acquisition, innovation in motion. These are important steps forward. Whether or not they're going to be accepted, embraced, and continued by the next administration is something that we all hope and see, and we hope that he will have more opportunity over the next year to articulate a vision beyond just what the programs are that have been put into place.
All of these points well made. Marc Pearl, President and CEO of the Homeland Security and Defense Business Council. Thanks, Marc.
Good to be with you, Morris.
Let's take a look now at names making news. OPM Inspector General Patrick McFarland says Acting Director Beth Cobert is legally prohibited from serving in that role. FCW broke this story. In a memo sent to Congress, McFarland writes, Cobert's appointment violates the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, and any actions since her nomination are void. President Obama picked a pair of experts to lead his commission on enhancing national cybersecurity. Former IBM executive Sam Palmisano and former National Security Advisor Tom Donilon met with Obama at the White House this week. The president created that commission by executive order earlier this month. The Government Accountability Office has denied a protest by Boeing challenging an Air Force award to Northrop Grumman. Now Northrop is all but assured an $80 billion next-generation stealth bomber contract. We'll keep our focus on federal contracts straight ahead on Government Matters. The General Services Administration wants to help agencies save money on Salesforce, but that's only part of the story. We discuss the impact of a new blanket purchase agreement next. In Tech Matters, the possible impact of consolidating Salesforce-related contracts. Late last year, the General Services Administration awarded 6 companies a spot on a blanket purchase agreement. Accenture, Acumen, Capgemini, Deloitte, Phase One, and PricewaterhouseCoopers will sell Salesforce integration and support services to the government. For more, I'm joined by Mohana Ravindranath, reporter for NextGov. Mohana, let's start with the basics. What is Salesforce and how do federal agencies use it?
So Salesforce is a customer relationship management product. So if you're a retailer, you might use it to manage your email communication or keep in touch with customers. On the public sector side of it, there are plenty of different applications. I've heard that the White House uses it to manage correspondence with the president, to find out who's writing him letters, to keep track of that. The Army has experimented with using Salesforce for recruiting, and I've heard that HHS has between 70 and 80 separate applications.
All right, makes sense. Now more on this BPA. You write, it represents an attempt to eliminate redundant Salesforce-related services across federal agencies by unifying the system through which they're purchased. The deal also encourages agencies to share the Salesforce applications they build. All right, so this is designed to save government money. Explain.
So part of it is money. The other part is just to reduce inefficient buying. So FITARA does require agencies to cut their wasteful spending, but it also requires them to sort of streamline the way they're buying things. So GSA has said that agencies that have Salesforce applications are often have their own standalone contracts with integrators, and the idea is really just to consolidate those and to provide more of a streamlined a group of integrators that the government can choose from.
Mohana, does this give Salesforce a competitive advantage over, say, Microsoft or Oracle?
So GSA does not seem to think so so far. One analyst that I talked to has said that this kind of agreement could potentially expose Salesforce to more potential customers. But aside from that, it doesn't seem like there is an extremely unfair advantage here.
Before we wrap up, put this BPA into context for us. It's part of a larger trend in federal IT contracting, like the adoption of agile development. That came up during an AFCEA Bethesda panel this week, and you were there. Any takeaways?
So I would call this part of a broader trend toward consolidation, just sort of changing the way the government is buying technology. At that event, at that panel, many of the officials that were on the panel were discussing new models for buying technology, whether that means buying things through a BPA like the GSA's Agile BPA, which sort of pre-approves a handful of vendors to sell Agile development software to the government, or it might mean finding a new way to pay for software development. So maybe you pay for a sprint versus paying for an end product.
Good to have your insight. Mohana Ravindranath, reporter for NextGov. Thanks.
Thanks.
The adoption of agile development is only one trend shaping IT marketplace. It's also contributing to some frustration. We gauge the mood of the federal contracting community straight ahead on Government Matters. In Management Matters, the mood of the federal contracting community. Over the past few months, we've been following a series of mergers and acquisitions, bid protests, and canceled RFQs. It's a market in flux. Joining me with the latest is Stan Soloway, former president and CEO of the Professional Services Council. He just launched a new consulting firm called Celero Strategies, LLC. Stan, let's start there. What is Celero? Who's on board?
Well, we're going to get a lot of people on board, I hope. It's a new strategic consultancy that I launched primarily in the face of a lot of the changes and pressures that the market's been facing. You and I have talked about them many times.
Right.
And it just seemed like a great time to go out and do something a little bit different. I had a great 15-year run at PSC. It's a great organization. But this was just an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and timing I couldn't pass up. So I'm out in the marketplace consulting with companies on how to position and strategize in a market that 2 years from now is going to look very different than it does today. 15
years is an impressive time to be at PSC. What were your other reasons for leaving?
That was really, it had nothing to do with the 15 years. It had to do with you get to a certain point, a certain amount of gray, and you say, if you're going to have another career, the time is what the time is. And I just decided about a year ago that it was time to explore a new career move.
All right, let's talk market forces. This week, Jason Miller over at Federal News Radio wrote a great article about a canceled RFQ at the General Services Administration. He called it part of a growing frustration in the federal contracting community, government and industry alike. Where is that frustration coming from, Stan?
Well, you know, we've talked a lot over the last several years about the uncertainty in the market and the lack of clarity in the market. And when you have an RFQ as large as the GSA contract was, that people have been working on and positioning for, both inside government and outside, a lot of investment behind it, summarily canceled, it causes natural frustration. And as Jason pointed out in his article, it's not the first time this has happened. I think we're in the early stages, or maybe the middle stages, of a lot of kind of recalibration on the government side. It's creating a amount of uncertainty amongst government side and, of course, in the industry as well, as to what projects and what programs are going to go forward, in what shape, who's going to actually do the buying. We've seen contracts that were formerly at the Department of Homeland Security now planned to be shifted over to GSA. We've seen other programs at OPM shifted to GSA. We've seen things canceled. So that uncertainty and that lack of clarity really is something that roils any market, and it's been very prevalent in the federal market. And when you see something like this, which is a fairly large contract, there's a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of energy and resources that have gone into planning for it.
And over the past few years, we've also followed a concerted effort by GSA and the White House to leverage the federal government's substantial buying power. How has it impacted small and mid-sized contractors? Are they better off?
Well, I don't know that the leveraging of buying power has yet, that we can yet see whether it's had a major impact or not on any specific category of company. It's a little bit too early to say. Some of the early data around what they call the Strategic Sourcing Initiative suggests that small businesses are doing well. The government's done pretty well with its small business goals. I think the larger question is, as this progresses, is how sophisticated the management of the process is going to be. It's one thing to, quote, strategically source and buy based on volume, but when you look at what the government needs and a lot of its technology requirements and so forth, there's a lot of complexity to it, a lot of sophistication to it. It doesn't lend itself to kind of a, I'll use the term, and I don't mean it in a pejorative sense, cookie cutter approach or a commodity approach. So that's really, I think, where the balance is going to play out. as we go forward with the strategic sourcing initiatives, category management, another term that's being used a lot, particularly at GSA.
As we know, the White House and Congress are increasingly focused on procurement. There's a DHS acquisition reform bill working its way through Congress. President Obama's final budget proposal really cemented the importance of federal IT and the need to replace legacy systems. Stan, how does industry feel about all of this attention? How can they capitalize on it?
Well, I think on balance, this is all good. I mean, the more attention that's paid to management in general, which is what you do so much of, but to acquisition and technology and the intersection of the two generally is a good thing. It doesn't mean that every proposal is a smart proposal. We had some very significant legislation come out of the Defense Authorization Bill in 2015. I think you're going to see more coming this year in the defense bill. I think the president's focus on IT and IT investment is important. Look, we're somewhere around 75 or 80% of our IT funds go to maintaining legacy systems. That's not a recipe for progress, and we've got to figure our way around that. So the president has proposed, as you know, I think it's a $3.5 billion revolving fund, a capital fund, if you will, to start spurring and incentivizing replacement of legacy systems. So there's a lot of attention being paid to it. I think there's still a lot more work to be done, but on balance, I think it's a good thing.
Stan Soloway, founder of Celero Strategies. Good luck with that, Stan. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Morris. Always a pleasure.
The intelligence community is paying close attention to a malware case out of California. On February 5th, hackers took the computer network at Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center hostage. It wasn't released for 10 days. Eva Pilgrim has the latest.
A Hollywood hospital admits paying $17,000 to a hacker in order to stop an attack on their computer system. The medical center's chief executive says it was in the hospital's best interest to pay, as it was the easiest way to solve the problem. 2 weeks ago, the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital's computer systems were infected with a virus known as ransomware. The virus locks access and shuts down internal communication. The hospital, still open, left this message on its voicemail assuring the public that they were still treating patients.
We want to assure you that patient care has not been compromised as we continue to address this incident.
The FBI releasing this statement: we are investigating the compromise with partners at LAPD to determine the person or group responsible.
Eva Pilgrim. And that's the latest from Washington. Thanks for being with us. I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.